Picture this. It's October 1944. A Japanese commander stands on a cliff overlooking the turquoise waters surrounding his island fortress. Through his binoculars, he counts the landing craft approaching, hundreds of them. His grip tightens. 1,000 Americans are about to hit the beach, but then something doesn't add up. These men rushing onto the sand, they're not carrying rifles, no machine guns, no artillery pieces being dragged up the beach. Instead, they're hauling bulldozers, welding equipment, and thousands upon thousands of interlocking steel plates that glint in the Pacific sun. The Japanese officer lowers his binoculars, confused. What kind of invasion force is this? He has no idea he's witnessing what would become one of the most devastating tricks of the entire Pacific War. A strategy so effective it would help bring an empire to its knees, without firing a single shot during those first crucial hours. This is the story of how America didn't just outfight Japan in World War II, they outbuilt them. And it all came down to a brilliant deception hiding in plain sight. To understand why this moment was so critical, we need to grasp the impossible challenge facing America in 1942. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, they controlled an empire spanning over 3 million square miles across the Pacific. The Japanese had conquered the Philippines, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies, and had established fortified bases on countless islands stretching from the Solomon Islands to the Mariana Islands. According to the U.S. Naval Institute's historical records, Admiral Ernest King and General Douglas MacArthur faced a brutal mathematical problem. Japan had spent years fortifying these positions. Each island was a fortress, and there were thousands of them. The traditional approach would require massive invasions of every strategic island, costing potentially millions of American lives and taking decades to complete. One military analysis from the period estimated that a conventional island-by-island assault could extend the war into the 1950s. The early battles proved this nightmare scenario. Guadalcanal, which began in August 1942, took 6 months of brutal fighting to secure. Tarawa in November 1943 cost over 1,000 Marine lives in just 76 hours to capture an island barely 2 miles long, as documented in the official Marine Corps history. But American strategists realized something crucial. They didn't need to capture every island. They needed air bases. The B-29 superfortress could strike Japan from 1,500 miles away, but only if America could build airfields close enough to the Japanese homeland. This led to the island-hopping strategy. Bypass heavily fortified islands and seize strategic locations that could host bomber operations. There was just one problem. Even when the Marines could take an island, it was usually a devastated wasteland of coral, mud, and shell craters. Building a functional airbase on these remote atolls seemed impossible. The ground was often too soft for heavy bombers. The terrain was uneven, and doing it under constant threat of Japanese counterattack? The generals said it couldn't be done quickly enough to matter. They were about to be proven spectacularly wrong. In March 1942, the U.S. Navy created something unprecedented. The construction battalions, quickly nicknamed the Seabees, from the initials CB. Unlike regular combat engineers, the Seabees were recruited specifically from the civilian construction trades. These were dock builders, steel workers, heavy equipment operators, electricians, men who had spent their lives building America's infrastructure. The average Seabee was 37 years old, far older than typical recruits because the Navy wanted experience over youth. According to the official Seabee history maintained by the Naval History and Heritage Command, their motto was simple: the difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. But even the Seabees needed the right tools, and that's where the second piece of the puzzle emerged. In 1940, a year before Pearl Harbor, the Army Corps of Engineers faced a training problem at Camp McCall in North Carolina. The ground was too soft for aircraft, an engineer named James Marston designed an ingenious solution. Interlocking steel planks, each 10 feet long and 15 inches wide, perforated with holes to reduce weight while maintaining strength. These Marston mats, officially designated as prefabricated steel planking or PSP, could be laid down rapidly by hand, connecting together like a massive steel jigsaw puzzle. Each plank weighed just 66 pounds, light enough for 2 men to carry, yet strong enough to support fully loaded bombers weighing up to 70 tons. The genius was in the design. The mats didn't require grading or preparing the ground beneath them. You could lay them directly over coral, sand, or even mud. The interlocking edges distributed weight evenly, preventing individual sections from sinking. According to declassified Army engineering reports, a crew could lay approximately 5,000 square feet of matting per day, enough to build a functional runway in less than a week. But the Japanese had no idea this technology existed. They had observed American construction projects in the pre-war years and calculated, based on conventional methods, that establishing a bomber base on a captured Pacific island would require months of preparation. Grading the land, importing gravel and concrete, laying foundations, pouring runways. Their entire defensive strategy relied on this timeline: fortify the islands, make them costly to take. And even if the Americans captured one, they'd have months to prepare counterattacks before any airbase became operational. This assumption would prove fatal. On June 15, 1944, American forces launched Operation Forager, the invasion of the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. These islands sat just 1,500 miles from Tokyo, perfect range for the B-29 superfortress. Saipan fell first, after 3 weeks of savage fighting that cost over 3,000 American lives and virtually annihilated the 30,000 Japanese defenders. But even as the battle still raged in pockets, the Seabees landed. This is where our opening scene truly begins to unfold. On July 24, 1944, the 1st Battalion of the 6th Naval Construction Brigade hit the beaches of Tinian, the smaller island just south of Saipan. According to Seabee historical records, they brought 13,000 troops of the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions. But critically, 1,500 of these men were Seabees. The Japanese commander, Colonel Kiyoshi Ogata, watched from his command post. He commanded 9,000 troops deeply entrenched across the island. The initial confusion he felt seeing bulldozers instead of tanks would have turned to horror over the following days. Within 24 hours of securing the beachhead, the Seabees began the transformation. They worked 18-hour shifts under the tropical sun. First came the bulldozers, flattening coral ridges, clearing jungle, scraping away topsoil down to the hard coral base. Behind them, teams surveyed and marked out runway dimensions. Then came the steel mats. The 9th Naval Construction Battalion's war diary, archived at the National Archives, describes the operation in precise detail. Teams of 6 men would carry the mats from supply dumps to the runway site. 2 men would position each plank while 4 more would hammer down the interlocking tabs with sledgehammers, creating an unbroken steel surface. The sound was deafening, thousands of hammers ringing against steel hour after hour. Diesel engines roaring, welders showering sparks as they reinforced joints. The Japanese mounted counterattacks, but the Marines held the perimeter while the Seabees kept building. According to official reports, work crews often continued right through artillery bombardments, only taking cover during the most intense barrages. 10 days, that's all it took. By August 1, 1944, just 10 days after the initial landing, the first B-29 superfortress touched down on Tinian's North Field. A base that Japanese military planners had calculated would take 4 to 6 months to construct was operational in less than 2 weeks. But the Seabees weren't finished. They built 4 parallel runways, each 8,500 feet long. They constructed taxiways, hard stands for over 200 aircraft, fuel storage for millions of gallons of aviation gas, ammunition bunkers, maintenance facilities, and housing for 20,000 personnel. By October 1944, less than 3 months after the invasion, Tinian hosted the largest and most active airbase in the world. The base at Northfield became larger than Manhattan's Central Park. Colonel Ogata never saw it completed. He died leading a final desperate banzai charge on July 31st, the day before the first bombers arrived. So what was the ultimate trick? It wasn't deception in the traditional sense. There were no fake radio transmissions or inflatable dummy equipment. The trick was speed. The entire Japanese defensive doctrine in the Pacific was predicated on time. According to post-war interviews with Japanese military leaders documented by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, their strategy assumed each American advance would follow a predictable pattern: assault, consolidation, construction, then deployment. They planned counter-offensives around this timeline. They positioned submarine fleets to attack supply lines during the lengthy construction phases. They prepared kamikaze airstrikes against bases they believed would take months to become operational. The Seabees and Marston Matts collapsed this timeline so dramatically that Japanese forces were caught completely off balance. From Tinian alone, B-29s began flying missions to Tokyo in November 1944. The official Air Force historical records show that between November 1944 and August 1945, bombers based on Tinian flew over 29,000 sorties against the Japanese home islands. This was strategic bombing on an unprecedented scale. Major cities were devastated. Industrial production collapsed. Japanese civilians began starving as the American submarine blockade tightened, and their ability to distribute resources crumbled under the bombing campaign. But the most historically significant missions came from Tinian in August 1945. On August 6th, the B-29 Enola Gay took off from Northfield, carrying an atomic bomb nicknamed Little Boy. 3 days later, Boxcar departed carrying Fat Man. Both aircraft flew from runways built on Marston Matting, laid down by Seabees less than a year earlier. The atomic bombings, combined with the Soviet invasion of Manchuria, forced Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945. The war that might have dragged on for years ended in significant part because American engineers could build air bases faster than Japanese strategists believed possible. Post-war analysis by military historians has consistently identified rapid airbase construction as one of the key asymmetric advantages America possessed. Japan could not replicate it. They lacked both the specialized engineering units and the innovative materials. According to a 1946 Army Corps of Engineers report, over 300 million square feet of Marston Matting was deployed across the Pacific Theater. That's nearly 11 square miles of interlocking steel, enough to build hundreds of airfields. The Japanese never developed a counter. They simply couldn't match the pace. The impact of this construction capability extended far beyond Tinian. Throughout the Pacific Theater, Seabees built 111 major airstrips and 441 piers, along with countless roads, bridges, fuel facilities, and hospitals. The total construction completed by the Seabees during World War II exceeded the entire pre-war construction industry output of the United States in any single year, according to Naval Historical Center records. The Marston Matting system itself proved so effective that it continued in military service through the Korean War, Vietnam War, and is still used today in some applications. Modern portable runway systems for rapid deployment are direct descendants of that 1940 design. But perhaps the most profound legacy was strategic. The Pacific War demonstrated that modern warfare wasn't just about firepower. It was about logistics, engineering, and the ability to project power rapidly across vast distances. The nation that could build and supply forward bases fastest would dominate future conflicts. This lesson shaped American military doctrine for the next 80 years. Today's concept of expeditionary warfare, rapidly deploying forces to remote locations, traces directly back to the Seabee operations in the Pacific. The individual Seabees themselves largely returned to civilian life after the war. Many went back to the construction trades, building America's post-war boom of highways, suburbs, and infrastructure. But they had proven something crucial, that skilled trades and engineering could be as decisive as any army. 6 Seabees were killed in action building the Tinian air base alone, according to official casualty records. Hundreds more died across the Pacific theater. They worked under fire in disease-ridden jungles through tropical storms and brutal heat. The Japanese commander who watched those first landing craft with confusion couldn't have known he was witnessing a revolution in military engineering. He was looking for an army. What he got was an industrial force that would reshape warfare itself. In the end, the ultimate trick against Japan wasn't a single brilliant deception. It was the systematic application of American industrial might and engineering innovation to collapse the timeline of war itself. While Japanese forces prepared for battles they expected to fight in 6 months, American bombers were already overhead in 6 weeks. While enemy strategists calculated required construction times in their war rooms, Seabees were hammering down steel mats 18 hours a day, making those calculations obsolete. The Pacific War was won through many factors: the courage of Marines hitting contested beaches, the sacrifice of Navy crews in brutal sea battles, the determination of Army Air Force's bomber crews flying through flak. But it was also won by construction workers who traded their hard hats for helmets, who built not just to construct but to conquer. Those 1,000 Americans who landed on Tinian in July 1944 carrying bulldozers instead of rifles didn't look like soldiers to the Japanese commander watching from the cliffs. They were something far more dangerous. They were builders. And in less than 2 weeks, they built the end game. If this story amazed you as much as it did me, smash that like button right now. This is the kind of forgotten World War II history that doesn't make it into most textbooks, and we're dedicated to bringing you these incredible untold stories. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the conflicts that shaped our world. We've got so many more shocking tactics, secret operations, and game-changing strategies to expose. And here's my question for you. What do you think was the most surprising military tactic of World War II? Was it the Seabees' rapid construction, the island hopping strategy, or something else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives. And if you want to understand how the world even arrived at this devastating conflict, check out our video, The Real Cause of World War II, right here. It breaks down the complex web of tensions, treaties, and miscalculations that led to the most destructive war in human history. Trust me, it'll completely change how you see the entire conflict. Thanks for watching, and remember, history is full of incredible stories just waiting to be discovered. We'll see you in the next one.